Ajikacharya Ashtatarasata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace of Bhai Charnaravinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada, Tirabhav Muhammad Saab Ki Jai, Shri Shri Radha Gopinath Bhagavan Ki Jai, Jai Nitai Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari Bol. Hare Krishna. Yes, better. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto number 3, chapter number 23. Devahuti's Lamentation, text number 44. Vibhajya navadatmanam Vibhajya navadatmanam Manavim suratotsukam Manavim suratotsukam Ramam niramayan reme Ramam niramayan neme Varshapughan muhurtatvat Varshapughan muhurtavat Vibhajya navadatmanam Manavim suratsotsukham Ramam niramayan reme Varshapughan muhurtavat Vibhajya navadatmanam Manavim suratotsukham Ramam niramayan reme Varshapughan muhurtavat Nivajya navadatmanam Manavim suratotsukham Reme Varshapughan muhurtavat Mataji Vibhajya navadatmanam Manavim suratotsukham Ramam niramayan reme Varshapughan muhurtavat. Word for word translation. Vibhajya, having divided, Navada, into 9, Atmanam, himself, Manavim, the daughter of Manu, Devahuti, Surata, for sex life, Utsukam, who is eager, Ramam, to his wife, Niramayan, giving pleasure, Reme, he enjoyed, Varshapugan, for many years, Muhurtavat, like a moment. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Abhay Charnaravinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. After coming back to his hermitage, he divided himself into 9 personalities just to give pleasure to Devahuti, the daughter of Manu, who was eager for sex life. In that way he enjoyed with her for many, many years, which passed just like a moment. Purport. Here is the daughter of Swayambhuv Manu Devahuti. Here the daughter of Swayambhuv Manu Devahuti is described as Surotsuka. After traveling with her husband all over the universe, in Mount Meru and the beautiful gardens of the heavenly kingdoms, she naturally became sexually stimulated, and in order to satisfy her sexual desire, Kardama Muni expanded himself into 9 forms. Instead of 1, he became 9, and 9 persons had sexual intercourse with Devahuti for many, many years. It is understood that the sexual appetite of a woman is 9 times greater than that of a man. It is clearly indicated here. That is clearly indicated here. Otherwise, Kardama Muni would have no reason to expand himself into 9. Here's another example of yogic power. As the Supreme Personality of Godhead can expand himself in millions of forms, a yogi can also expand up to 9 forms, but not more than that. Another example is that of Saubari Muni. He also expanded himself into 8 forms. But however powerful a yogi may be, he cannot expand himself into more than 8 or 9 forms. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, however, can expand himself into millions of forms, Anantarupa, innumerable countless forms, as stated in the Brahma Samhita. No one can compare to the Supreme Personality of Godhead by any conceivable energetic manifestation of power. Om Jnanatimurandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Mukham karoti vachalam bhangam langayate girim yat kripatamaham vande Shri Gurun Tirtharanam Paramannamadavam Shri Chaitanyeshwaram. Hare Krishna. So we're continuing with what happened to Kardama Muni after showing Devahuti the aerial mansion and the heavenly planets, and especially the heavenly gardens, and how they enjoyed in such places. And it's mentioned that this particular heavenly mansion that Kardama Muni had created had come back to his hermitage, back by the side of Bindu Sarovara. So now, for the purpose, we shouldn't forget, the purpose behind all of this was simply to put them in the right, or to invoke or incite the right mood in which to procreate. And that was the purpose in which Kardama Muni had actually expanded his yogic power. And so again we must emphasize that Kardama Muni and Devahuti are not ordinary conditioned souls. Kardama Muni actually had been performing tapasya for many, many thousands of years. He had seen the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he accepted a wife simply under the instruction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead through Lord Brahma. So Kardama Muni was following the orders of the spiritual master, and it's mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam earlier on in this chapter that Kardama Muni had created this mansion simply to create the atmosphere in which to produce proper children, in which he could perform his duties as Prajapati. In the same way, Devahuti left the opulences of her father Swayambhuv Manu and entered the hermitage of Kardama Muni and lived a very simple and humble, menial life of service. And for her to accept, again, the opulences that Kardama Muni has given for sense gratification does not make any sense. But she had done it not for her own sense gratification, rather to assist her husband and assist in her devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So her being Surotsuka in this verse, being eager for sex life, was simply for the pleasure of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to produce children so that she can assist her husband in procreating the universe. And we shouldn't see it anything beyond that. And the later half of the purport, Prabhupada talks a lot more about how the mystic powers of the yogis work. And one of the particular mystic powers is that they can expand themselves into many forms. It's very similar to the concept we have of clones. How sometimes we desire to be in many places at once. That there are clones that we can produce clones of ourselves so that we can be here in the temple, Simultaneously, we can be at home. Simultaneously, we can be at work. And so that way our life will be easy. We hope so. But you see here, a yogi like Kardama Muni is able to expand up to 9 forms. And that's the maximum for a yogi. But as explained in previous verses and previous classes, Brihat Bhagavatamrita explains that Narada Muni, Arjuna, and the other personal associates of Lord Krishna, they appear with Lord Krishna in every universe. And it's mentioned Krishna's pastimes are not simply just, come and show. They're eternally being performed in the spiritual world and in the material world. But it's just like the rising and setting of the sun. In this universe, Krishna may have disappeared, but in another universe, Krishna will appear. In another universe, Krishna will be performing Damodar Leela. And in another verse, Krishna will be riding on the chariot on Kurukshetra. And in all of these universes, the personal associates exist. So it's mentioned Brihad Bhagavatamrita that the Supreme Lord has endowed His devotees with the potency to expand themselves into innumerable forms just like Himself. So you can see here that however powerful yogi may be, he cannot expand himself more. He cannot expand him into more than 8 or 9 forms of himself. So a devotee is much greater than a yogi. Another perfect example of how a devotee is greater than a yogi. Because the devotee is completely taken shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he is Yogeshwar. He possesses all qualities. He possesses all opulences. Sadaishwarya Purna. That is Krishna himself. So he is known as Anantarupa. He possesses countless innumerable forms as mentioned in Brahma Samhita. And a yogi, although being somewhat surrendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because Krishna mentions Uddhava Gita, it's not possible to get mystic powers unless one is somehow or other absorbed in meditation on Lord Krishna, on meditation of himself. So then he mentions that to get potency like this, to the degree one is absorbed in him, in Krishna, to that degree one will be able to have greater capacity of yogic powers. So you can see that the devotee is much more powerful than the yogi because the devotee is completely absorbed in Krishna. And Krishna is directly taking care of the devotee. In other words, Krishna is personally present wherever a devotee is. Because the devotee is one with the Lord in the sense that he is simply one with the will of the Lord. He is ready to, as Prabhu mentioned yesterday, dance like a dog in the hands, or be a dancing dog in the hands of Krishna. So he's a puppet in the hands of the Supreme Lord, ready to perform any activity the Supreme Lord wants. So because it's in relationship with the Lord's will, the Lord's desire, naturally the Lord will empower the devotee to be successful, because that's what the Lord wants. So you can see here that a very nice example is given by Srila Prabhupada. One early morning walk, Prabhupada was returning back from the morning walk into the car. And there he met one of his disciples, and she had a child. And so as he sat down in the car and the door was open, he looked at her. And while looking at her, he asked, "So, is it monkey style or cat style? Which is better?" And the devotee was looking, and all the devotees were looking at Prabhupada and each other, and, "Sorry Prabhupada, we don't understand. Monkey style or cat style? Which one is better?" And so all the devotees didn't understand. And this Mataji told Prabhupada, "Sorry Prabhupada, I don't understand." And Prabhupada told her, "You see, the monkey style is such that when the baby monkey holds on to the mother, the baby monkey holds onto the mother by its own strength. The mother monkey will jump branch to branch, but the baby monkey will hold on for life. And there are cases where the baby monkey has let go and passed away. Whereas for the cat, what is the situation? The cat will hold on to its kitten by the neck. And the kitten, what will it do? It will just simply hang there. It won't worry about what's happening. Being completely surrendered, being under the shelter of the mother, it will be taken from one place to another." So Prabhupada explained to her, the devotees are like cats. We follow the cat style. And the cat style is that we simply take shelter of Radha Gopinath, and Gopinath will take care of everything. Whereas the yogis, they perform their their self-realization in the form of monkey style, by their own endeavor. their pride is still there to the extent that they think they can force themselves into the spiritual world. So this is the monkey style and this is the cat style. And it's mentioned that because the Supreme Personality of Godhead is directly taking care of his devotees, therefore the devotees are endowed or imbued or empowered to carry out the particular actions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So with that we can understand how dear the devotees of the Lord are, how powerful the devotees of the Lord are. And we can see that in the life of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Today is the Tirobhav or the disappearance day of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Srila Prabhupada. And it's a wonderful opportunity to meditate on the grand qualities of our predecessor Acharya. In fact, it is by his mercy that we have the opportunity to associate with Srila Prabhupada and the opportunity to perform devotional service here in the Western countries. So we see here that there are two themes you can take from this purport. One is that how the devotee is greater than the yogis, the brahmanas and so forth. And another one you can take is that how the Supreme Personality Godhead empowers his devotees to perform devotional service. So we can see in the case of our grand spiritual master Srila Prabhupada, he's an empowered devotee, a Shaktivesh avatar of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted to preach that Pritivete yata ache nagaradigram sarvata prachara hoibe moranam. That in every town and village that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was saying, my name will be sung. And to that extent, he had sent Srila Prabhupada to make that statement come true. So you can understand, for the Lord to perform an activity, he is known as Atmaraman Aptakam. Whatever he desires is immediately satisfied. So Srila Prabhupada had come to satisfy the desire of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that this Krishna consciousness movement be spread throughout the world. And that was only possible because he had got the order of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur to preach in the Western countries and to print and distribute books. So we see in the life of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur that before him was Bhaktivinoda Thakur, his spiritual master and his father. And before Bhaktivinoda Thakur had appeared, the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had become quite distorted, to the extent that people, when they heard the word Vaishnava, they thought of debauchees, sentimentalists, they thought of low-class people, because at that time people were using the principles or the philosophy of Vaishnavism for their own sense gratification. And we see that nowadays happening with a lot of impersonalists, where they use the Rasa Leela as a instrument for their own sense gratification. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he spent his whole life pretty much cleaning up that scene, to the extent that he revived the original tradition of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and people developed respect for the Vaishnavas once again. But rather they were able to see what a Vaishnava really is. But because Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur had performed such wonderful service, he sacrificed his sleep, he sacrificed his necessities, he sacrificed it to the bare minimum so that he could preach Krishna consciousness. And to be able to further propagate this Krishna consciousness, he prayed to the Supreme Personality of Godhead for a ray of Vishnu. Because if you think about it, Bhaktivinoda Thakur was the only person, of course all the Vaishnavas there, the proper Vaishnavas at that time, the Vaishnava Acharyas there, they were performing their duties. But it was Bhaktivinoda Thakur himself who was able to propagate and clean up this whole mess performed by the Sahajiyas and bring Krishna consciousness to a respectable position in society. Him alone, in his position as a magistrate. So you can see that Bhaktivinoda Thakur had taken up a mission, a very vast and very large mission on his shoulders. And he was performing it, but his main concern was who will be there to propagate it after I'm gone. And so he prayed to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He prayed for a ray of Vishnu, somebody, an empowered soul to appear in his family so that he could take up the mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And that ray of Vishnu was Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And it's mentioned in Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's biography by Bhakti Vikas Maharaj. I think it's called Bhaktisiddhanta Vaibhav. And there it's mentioned that at the age of 5 months, while in Puri, and during the Rath Kart festival, during the Ratha Yatra, there Lord Jagannath had stopped right in front of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's home. And Jagannath wouldn't move. And so then Bhaktivinoda Thakur took the opportunity to tell his wife, Bhagavati Devi, to tell her to bring Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who was only a small baby, and offer him at the feet of Lord Jagannath. And it's mentioned that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur went to touch the lotus feet. As a child, touched the lotus feet of Lord Jagannath. And at that moment, the garland of Lord Jagannath fell on Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So it's a good indication of how Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was a personal associate of Lord Jagannath, and how he had appeared simply on the order of Lord Jagannath to preach Krishna consciousness by assisting Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So then it's mentioned that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur took initiation from his spiritual master, in the sense that his Shiksha Guru, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, brought him into the line of Harinam by chanting the holy name. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur knew that just being the father, he could not be the Diksha Guru. So then he encouraged Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur to take shelter of Gaurakishore Das Babaji Maharaj. And it's mentioned that when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur went to meet Gaurakishore Das Babaji Maharaj, Gaurakishore Das Babaji Maharaj was a bhajananandi, which means that he was engaged in bhajan, his own personal sadhana. And it's a bona fide method of devotional service. And he wasn't willing to take disciples. He was not willing to let go of his bhajana simply for accepting disciples, at the risk of developing pride, developing the taste for prestige, of honor, worship, so on and so forth. So he was very protective of his devotional service. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, under the order of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, repeatedly went to take shelter. And Gaurakishore Das Babaji Maharaj at one point said that, okay, I will ask Mahaprabhu. You come back later, I will ask Mahaprabhu. And so and then to send him off, Gaurakishore Das Babaji Maharaj said this. The second time Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur came, he said, so have you asked Mahaprabhu? What is the order of Mahaprabhu? And then Gaurakishore Das Babaji Maharaj said, oh, I forgot to ask. You come back later, I will ask. Then the third time Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur came, Gaurakishore Das Babaji Maharaj was very straightforward. He said, Mahaprabhu has not given the order, you leave. Don't come back here. And it is that point that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he fell at the feet of Gaurakishore Das Babaji Maharaj and said that, what is there that is left for me? I'll simply cry and cry and cry until I achieve the lotus feet, until I achieve the shelter of your lotus feet. And Gaurakishore Das Babaji Maharaj, seeing the sincerity of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, initiated him. So this is our predecessor Acharya. It's mentioned that he later on performed the sacrifice or the vow of chanting 1 billion names of Lord Krishna. It's mentioned that 3 lakh names of the Lord is equivalent to 3 times 64 rounds. And so it's mentioned that he vowed for 10 million rounds monthly. That was his quota. And he finished a billion rounds just over 9 years. But this is the interesting thing. Some people may quote, just see, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Srila Prabhupada, he went and chanted the holy name in the Dham, so I will also go chant. But it's mentioned that even though he did that, he still performed his bhajan, he still preached, he still wrote, and he still served the Dham every single day. His vow was so severe that he had only one servant, and if it rained, the hut in which he had holes, and if it rained, he would just put an umbrella and continue chanting. He would not care for the weather. And once he had finished his 1 billion rounds, what did Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur did? Did he simply stay in the Dham?
he actually went to Kolkata. And all the sadhus were confused. They told Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, don't go there, you fall down. It's just simply full of maya. You stay here in the Dham and perform your japa, perform your bhajan. That is enough. Your sadhana is sufficient. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, actually, my sadhana is there in Kolkata to go and preach. Although it's heavily infested with the modes of ignorance and passion, still it is my service to go and preach. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur actually even goes forward to even say that simply going to the Dham to chant the holy name as a pretense to avoid preaching, to avoid devotional service, it's just simply cheating of the mind. Actually, that is maya, rather than going to the cities to preach. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, not only did he chant, but he also maintained the preaching. And so when he went to preach in Kolkata, he developed the Gaudiya Mat. Before all of this, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, at one particular stage of life, Bhaktivinoda Thakur was so powerful that he had to establish one last milestone or victory for the Vaishnavas. And that was because the caste Brahmanas, they were going against the Vaishnavas. And they were saying the Vaishnavas were simply sentimentalists and that they themselves, the Brahmanas, are more powerful than the Vaishnavas. The Vaishnavas are less than the Brahmanas. And so Bhaktivinoda, the Vaishnavas set up what we call a seminar. But they set up a situation where they could preach and have a discussion. And so Bhaktivinoda Thakur was invited as the main speaker. But he had come down with a disease known as rheumatism. He could not get out of bed. And so he was crying out, who will be there to present the philosophy of Vaishnavism? And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur stepped forward and said, I will go, my father. And he went. And actually before he had gone, he had written very extensively about the glories of the Vaishnavas and how they are greater than the Brahmanas. And his whole lecture at that point in time was simply directed at that one point. But the way he presented Krishna consciousness, or the way he presented the glories of the Vaishnavas was very interesting. That he went before everyone, and in fact, although they weren't invited, many caste Goswamis were there. Caste Goswamis are those persons who don't really follow the principles of Vaishnavas to the dot, but rather take the privilege of their hereditary or the lineage of their families having the Goswamis, or rather the family having the right to worship the deity. So some of them, those of that mentality, appeared in that arena. And it's mentioned that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur opened up by preaching and glorifying the Brahmanas. And everyone was so happy because even the Brahmanas were thinking, man, we can't even glorify ourselves like this. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati just gave them so much glorification. And before finishing, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur then started glorifying the Vaishnavas. And he established the glories of the Vaishnavas so solidly, the Brahmanas couldn't do anything. They had to simply keep quiet and accept. And it is from there that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur started developing, or they started developing some sort of envy and jealousy against Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Because what was he shaking? He was shaking their ground of sense gratification. Because if they continued going on saying that they are Brahmanas and they are greater than the Vaishnavas, especially the Vaishnavas that come from lower birth, it is not that they were against Vaishnavas that came from Brahmana caste. They were okay with that. But they were against bringing people of lower births, say for example the Shudras, the Chandalas, the Vaishyas, the Kshatriyas, and bringing them into Vaishnavism and bringing them to the top standard of devotional service that's greater than the Brahmanical culture. For them it was a hurt to their pride, a blow to their pride. It was simply a matter of envy and jealousy which forced them to go against Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. It's mentioned they went with so much envy that when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would go around on their parikrama, they hired gundas and rogues and thieves and dacoits to throw boulders and rocks on them. They would create landslides so that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would not be able to enter certain holy places, would not be able to leave the Dham. They would create so much havoc that sometimes the streets of Navadvip would be filled with the blood of Vaishnavas. So when this happened, at this particular point in time, the propaganda people, the respectful people of the Dham, of Navadvip, of India in general, heard of this incident. They started going against the caste Brahmanas. And this created so much wonderful propaganda for the Gaudiya mission, the Gaudiya Math, that everyone started recognizing Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, recognizing Vaishnavism as greater than caste Brahmanism. And so Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was becoming more and more successful in his preaching, to the extent that they asked, some of the media asked him, are you going to press charges against the culprits, the rogues and thieves? And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, why should I? They were foolish people that performed my wonderful, favorable service for me. By their acts, we were able to propagate Krishna consciousness on a greater level. So why should we bother? So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, not only was he very strict in preaching, very strict in giving Krishna consciousness, but at the same time he was very, very tolerant, peaceful, compassionate and gentle. It's mentioned the Vaishnava Acharyas are like hard as a thunderbolt and soft as a lotus flower. So when required, they'll be able to use these facilities to preach Krishna consciousness. And the biggest thing when we hear of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is that we hear him of the Simha Guru, the Lion Guru, because he would simply preach Krishna consciousness with no compromise. He would preach so heavily, he would not even allow any sort of compromise or any sort of leniency in practicing Krishna consciousness. Because his mood was that, it's mentioned here, I'm reading from Giriraj Maharaj's website. Here he's mentioning that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's mood was that that it's not simply by glorification alone. In this age of Kali, it's not simply by glorification alone that we can bring people to Krishna consciousness. If we glorify devotional service and only glorify devotional service, of course, criticizing material nature and criticizing sense gratification is a glorification of bhakti. But simply by saying sweet words, favorable words that of the glories of bhakti and not denouncing material life, in this age of Kali, what will people think? Take a guess. If we go out there and say, devotional service is so great, just chant Hare Krishna, you'll be happy, and just leave it at that, what do you think people will do? They will just take that as an excuse. Okay, I will chant Hare Krishna and still continue my nonsense. This is the age of Kali Yuga. Because people don't have the brain matter. We just don't have the brain substance to understand that if we chant Hare Krishna, we need to let go of material nature. Krishna consciousness and sense gratification go ill together, as Prabhupada says. So we are alpamedasa, lacking spiritual knowledge. So therefore, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is saying that by the negative method, or by the method of criticizing material nature, that you'll be able to see the difference between truth and falsity, truth and the untruth. And then that will be easier for us to convey the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So therefore he was saying that we can't simply just gloss over devotional service, gloss over the difficulties of material existence. We can't just simply neglect explaining the miseries of material existence. Because sometimes when you preach, you'll come across people like that. You Hare Krishnas only just simply speak about the negativity. You should be more positive about material life. You should be more positive about the material world. All you do is just simply, it's miserable, it's temporary, it's all useless here. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says something very interesting. He says here that this method of preaching Krishna consciousness and criticizing material existence will cause an atmosphere of controversy. And it will cause difficulty. But if you're able to preach in this way, of course it requires intelligence. You don't simply go out there with guns blazing and you simply nuke the person. You simply smash, the chopper method. You go out there and just simply cut everyone down, one hand Bhagavatam, other hand, you go around with a weapon. It's not like that. Intelligence is required. But we don't compromise, we don't speak untruth for the sake of being palatable. We don't say anything simply to make things nice for people to hear. Rather, our duty is that to expose the deluding nature of material existence. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is saying this. The ways of the deluding energy are so intricate that unless their mischievous nature is fully exposed, it is not possible for the soul in the conditioned state to avoid the snares spread by the enchantress Maya for encompassing the ruin of her only two willing victims. It is a duty which shall be sacred to all who have been enabled to attain even a distant glimpse of the Absolute. In other words, if we're able to just simply give them a small window, a crack in the glare of Maya, in the covering of Maya, if we're simply just able to give a small fraction, a glimpse into the spiritual world, that is success. That is considered a success. And it's so easy. You either give them prasadam or tell them to chant Hare Krishna. Make them hear the holy name. This is something that I found very, very striking, at least when I read The Great Transcendental Adventure by Kurma Prabhu, about the Krishna consciousness movement beginning in Australia. It's mentioned when Bali Mardan Maharaj and Upendra Prabhu appeared in Sydney. It's mentioned at one particular stage, Upendra Prabhu was standing in Wynyard Station and he was handing out Back to Godhead magazines. And at that point, while wearing dhoti and kurta, Charu Prabhu, at that time, he had finished his job and he was walking back home through Wynyard Station and saw Upendra Prabhu distributing. And he noticed that something is about this person, something interesting. So he went and approached Upendra Prabhu and asked him, what are you doing, everything. And Upendra Prabhu explained, I'm spreading Krishna consciousness under the order of my spiritual master, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. We're preaching the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that by chanting Hare Krishna, people will become peaceful, happy, and they'll be able to transcend the modes of material nature. So on and so forth, he was explaining. And while talking to Charu Prabhu, as a person was walking by, he would stop and then whisper in their ear, Hare Krishna. He'd whisper in their ears, Hare Krishna, as they walk past. And Charu Prabhu, he noticed that, and it's mentioned there, that you can see that that person wasn't really being receptive to the preaching. But by hearing the holy name, the seed has entered their heart. They have been given an opportunity to take to devotional service. But then you could be thinking, you're simply a bunch of people that are annoying the public, going there and showing your books. You're going there and saying something in his ear, invading his privacy. All of these things, you come up with so much nonsense arguments. But actually on the transcendental platform, what are we doing? We're giving them the opportunity to escape the material existence. They've gone through 8.4 million species of life. They've gone up and down in the universe so many times. Whatever Kardama Muni is showing here by engaging in his yogic powers, we have done everything that needs to be done in this material world. And finally, we have the human form of life. And then finally, we get chance to practice Krishna consciousness and get out. And here are people saying, what are you doing? You're invading privacy. You're causing problems. So that they can continue sending souls again back down to the hellish condition of life. It doesn't sound very sane. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, his mood was like that. If I could just give one opportunity to the soul to escape the witch of Maya, he would consider that his preaching is a success. So we're coming close to time. I will quickly cut through a couple of things. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was criticized for being a materialist because he would wear coat and suit to preach. He would drive in a car, even though being a sannyasi. He would have furniture. He would speak the English language very proficiently. He would meet very materialistic people, such as the British people in high positions. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, his mood was what? His mood was Yukta Vairagya. He didn't care for the words of low-class people. His mood was, I need to do anything and everything to preach Krishna consciousness. For myself, I'll be strict, austere. But for Krishna consciousness, for Radha Gopinath, I will preach. And he spent so much money. It's mentioned that when Prabhupada was in India, just to get a couple of cars was so expensive. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, many years before that, had a limousine. The Gaudiya Math had 4 cars, 1 horse and a cart, an elephant and a camel. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was very clear on what needed to be done to preach Krishna consciousness. On the note of, I'll come back to that. Yeah, I'll come back to that. So, problem was that at one particular point in time, the disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, only a few of them, not all of them, they started getting attached to the facilities that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was giving to his disciples for preaching. Some were getting very extravagant facilities for living, for preaching, and they ended up using it for their own sense enjoyment. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was so furious, he was so disappointed that he started establishing rules and restrictions on when devotees can use what. But it really disturbed his heart that people were using or misusing the Lord's resources for their own sense gratification. So he very disturbed to the extent that he explains, Prabhupada explains, I was walking with my spiritual master in Vrindavan, and he was saying that if I could, I would sell every single marble of this Bagh Bazaar temple. And I would what? Print books. And Prabhupada says, yes, I heard this from his mouth. I took it from his mouth, that he is very fond of printing books. So then Prabhupada says, distribute books, distribute books, distribute books. So you can understand this is the mission of Srila Prabhupada given to him by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And what was Prabhupada's mood? Our Prabhupada's mood was that, just see, my spiritual master is sending all of these disciples, all of these people to help assist me in carrying out his order. So this is the mercy of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, that he preached very hard. His spiritual master was a pioneer. His father was a pioneer. He was a pioneer in preaching Krishna consciousness, in showing Yukta Vairagya, in preaching very strictly. And Prabhupada was a pioneer in giving Krishna consciousness according to time, place and circumstance. Prabhupada was strict, but he knew when to be strict and when not to be strict. You see, in the early days of Krishna consciousness in the 26th 2nd Avenue, Matchless Gift Store, Prabhupada would let the disciples pretty much have their day. He would make sure they chanted their rounds. He would cook for them, he would serve them, and he would clean the vessels and all the pots and everything himself. This was Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada was so lenient, but then as you can read in Prabhupada Lilamrit, slowly he developed his disciples and started teaching them how to practice Krishna consciousness strictly. And so one particular instance, and I'll end with this, Prabhupada had a letter from one of his disciples. And what had happened was that this disciple was preaching so heavily in a particular place in India that it caused controversy. People were yelling at the devotees. Some of the well-wishers were saying, no, you should not criticize other people like that. Just simply speak your devotional service. Just speak about bhakti. Don't criticize. And so Prabhupada got this letter from this devotee. And he told Prabhupada, what should I do? Should I preach strict as it is, or should I change it to meet them? Because this disciple was saying, all these demigods' worship is useless. You should just simply perform devotional service. And it just agitated the Indian community so much. So then Prabhupada said, why should we preach in such a way that is palatable for them and compromise and reduce the potency of our devotional service? I will not. My spiritual master did not compromise. I will not compromise, and my disciples will not compromise. Prabhupada sent a letter back to him. So you can see Prabhupada's mood. Prabhupada did not want us to compromise devotional service. He did not want us to put Krishna down. He wanted us to glorify Gopinath for who he is as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this is the last, pastime of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. I also always like to meditate on this one as well. There are two actually, I'll tell you two. One is that whenever Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur heard that a brahmachari had gone out and distributed a couple of magazines just for a few paisa, a couple of cents, he was so happy. He was just so happy. In another instance, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, one of his disciples came back. He was preaching with another godbrother, and he came back and he said, Guru Maharaj, this disciple, he's going and preaching so so heavily, so directly, it's just causing havoc. He's going there and preaching and telling them demigod this and rascal that and impersonal this and worship Krishna that. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he heard him and he said that, very good, bring him here. He is qualified to preach. Let him continue preaching. And so when that disciple came to meet Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur blessed him. He was so happy with him. That you are preaching the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as it is. You have my full blessings. Now go and preach. So you can see, we need to know what exactly is our goal in life. We need to actually know what is happiness. And happiness comes from serving Radha Gopinath. And how do we know how to serve Radha Gopinath that to get happiness? When they are happy. And how do we know that they are happy? By following the orders of the spiritual master. That is the only way. Because we have forgotten Radha Gopinath. We don't know who they are, their position. We have forgotten what actually gives them happiness, and we've forgotten how to act in that way. But the spiritual master trains us and guides us to act in such a way. So that we need to understand is the essence. If we just simply follow the orders of the spiritual master as our life and soul, as Prabhupada did for Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and as Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur did for his spiritual master, Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj. We need to follow in the same footsteps. That Prabhupada says that this is the essence of devotional service, of Krishna consciousness. If we just, this is the cheat, this is the trick. You want to know the fast track to becoming advanced, to become absorbed, to develop love of Godhead. The fast track is you simply take the orders of the spiritual master as one's life and soul. Which means you neglect your own happiness. That today, I don't feel like doing book distribution. I don't feel like going out. I don't feel like preaching. I don't feel like cleaning. I don't feel like doing anything. I don't feel like chanting. All of these I don't like should be thrown out. It should simply be duty and commitment, if not with enthusiasm and with love. That my spiritual master has saved me, has instructed me. I have made the commitment to chant, to follow the 4 regular principles. Till I die, I should follow strictly. With that mood, with that sincerity, of course, you may trip and fall, but you get back up again by the mercy of the spiritual master. You never let go of devotional service. And sorry, I keep saying last point. I guess this is the really last point. When Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur left his body, one of his instructions to his disciples was that never leave Krishna consciousness. Never leave the devotional service of the Lord. Whatever may come, whatever may happen, whatever situation you may put yourself into, never let go of chanting the holy names. Never let go of performing devotional service to the Lord. That there is nothing else here that you can do in the material world that will give you satisfaction. And there's no other process of atonement other than practicing Krishna consciousness itself. So never let go of devotional service. And the basic method is just simply follow the orders of the spiritual master. That's all. And if we constantly read Srimad Bhagavatam and give Srimad Bhagavatam to others, Bhagavad Gita and all of the other books of Prabhupada, our advancement in Krishna consciousness will be swift and sure. And we'll get the blessings of the previous acharyas, of course. So today is a wonderful day to pray to our previous acharyas. Generally, we're not given that access to pray to the previous acharyas, Prabhupada says. But on the disappearance and appearance days, it is a wonderful, unique opportunity to fall at their lotus feet, at Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's lotus feet, and beg them for the opportunity to become strict, pure, and sincere in devotional service. To practice devotional service so strictly so that we can please our spiritual master and Srila Prabhupada. And, of course, Shri Radha Gopinath and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Okay, I'll end here. There's so much to say of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. We can read more on Giriraj Maharaj's website, or else you can search online. There's a book by Bhakti Vikas Maharaj known as Bhaktisiddhanta Vaibhav. That's the biography of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And we'll also be doing Pushpanjali and we'll be doing Pushpanjali and Kirtan for Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur at 11 in the temple. So if you're here, please come. And we need everyone's association so that we can glorify Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Shri Radha Gopinath Bhagavan ki jai. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nithai Gaur Premanande Hari.